you got your Bible this morning, I want you to turn with me to Acts chapter 18. We'll be there in just a minute. I want to welcome everybody that's joining with us online. And man, we're glad that you are able to make it here with us. If you need a set of notes, hopefully if you're in the house today, you're able to pick up a set of notes on your way in. If not, then you can get a set by going to our website, nbcmetairie.org, and you can click on there's a little worship tab right there, and you can click on that, and that will have our notes that will guide our time together today. You know, as we get into this next part of our series in the book of Acts, I've entitled my sermon today, The Fellowship of the King. The Fellowship of the King. And that kind of sounded a little bit familiar to me because, you know, maybe you were familiar with a movie that came out or really a book that came out years ago called Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the King. The Fellowship of the Ring. Excuse me. And it's hard to believe if you were able to see that movie. Some of us remember when it came out in theaters, when the Lord of the Rings came out. Now, it came out in 2001 in theaters. And it's, of course, an epic fantasy adventure. It's directed by Peter Jackson, based on the 1954 novel, The Fellowship of the Ring, the first volume, which was written, of course, by J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote all of the Lord of the Rings. And as the story goes, and some of you already know this, but for those that might be filling this in, as the story goes, it's about a young hobbit, which is it's like an adult, but they're the size of a child. And so you've got this young hobbit, and his name is Frodo, and his 8 unlikely companions who begin a journey to destroy a ring, just a little ring, that was once forged by the evil Sauron. And so if Sauron is able to get this ring, he'll come back. And they don't live on Earth, they live on a place called Middle Earth, okay? And he'll be able to come back and rule Middle Earth. And for various reasons, all of the companions, except for one, stray, and they're not able to help Frodo entirely right there with his journey. There's one that comes, and his name is Sam. I think we have a picture of Frodo and Sam right up here. And so Sam helps Frodo along the way, and even there's these moments that Frodo cannot go any further. He cannot go any more, and it might be a toll that is just taken on his body, or it might be that he's injured himself. It might be a couple of different reasons. The ring is weighing upon him. He's the ring bearer, if you will. And so he has the fellowship of Sam the whole way through, and he wouldn't have been able to accomplish his mission without Sam. And as I thought about that, and I thought about how Jesus is our friend, but he is also our king, and that we have been talking about, over this for the past month, that you and I have an assignment. And that assignment is very similar assignment to Frodo and Sam. Of course, it's not to destroy a ring, but it is to tear down the work of our enemy. Have you thought about that? You might have just thought, oh, Pastor Dan, we've been talking about sharing our faith and evangelizing and telling people about Jesus. Well, yes, we have been talking about that. But have you considered that we have also, and simultaneously through that, we've also been saying every time you share your faith, you are simultaneously destroying the kingdom of the enemy. And that's something that he's called us to do, that we are sharing our faith, but we can't do that work alone. We cannot do that work alone. It's too much. In your notes, I've put a Bible verse of Deuteronomy 31, verse 6. This is actually God speaking through Moses. The people of Israel are getting ready to go into the promised land. And this is what it says. It says, "Be strong and courageous. Don't be terrified or afraid of them." Now look at this. "For the Lord your God is the one who will go with you." He goes with us. He's not Samwise Gamgee, okay? He is the King. He is the one that walks alongside us. Have you ever thought about that as you're going to work and you're thinking to yourself, God is with me? Have you ever thought about students as you're going to school and you might be trying to rehearse, things for a test or a quiz, or maybe that you forgot your homework or all those different things, but you're thinking to yourself, God is with me. And if you know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, He's not just with you, He is in you. That's why even when we go into Christmas time, we have this term called Emmanuel. Of course, that's describing Jesus coming to earth. But we have this term Emmanuel. It simply means God with us. Today, what I want you to understand is that we have fellowship. We have a fellowship of the King, and that you are never alone. He was like that, as we're talking to Joshua, He'll never leave you or abandon you, it says. He was like that for Joshua and the people of Israel. He was like that with Paul, and He is like that with us. Now, as we kind of dive into this, we talked a little bit about this last week, but I just want to bring it up one more time. We're going to put up here on the screen a map. And that map is going to kind of show us where we are on Paul's second missionary journey. We've been coming down from Macedonia down into the land of Achaia. Achaia is modern-day Greece. The Apostle Paul went to Athens, and now he is in Corinth. And so Corinth is actually one of the big cities of the day. In fact, by Paul's day, Corinth had replaced Athens as the political and commercial center in Greece. So it really wasn't, a lot of times we think Athens was the big city. And certainly it was a big city, but Corinth had replaced it. I have a couple of pictures that I want you to be able to see as we put up here. This is one of the temples of Corinth, not anything to the one true God. Corinth was full of idols during that time. And Corinth, very similar to Athens, had its own version of an Acropolis. In Athens, there's an Acropolis. Well, you also have the Acropolis. I tell you what, if we could go back to that last picture real quick, you'll actually see that mountain. We'll go back. See that mountain in the background? That is the Acropolis in Corinth. And on the top of that is where they had the temple to Athena. 1,500 feet above Corinth is where this temple, my bad, it's the temple to Aphrodite, who is the goddess of love. And grab a picture of this. Let me just kind of help you understand how immoral Corinth was. They had over 1,000 priestesses who were ritual prostitutes who came out every night. Can you imagine a city with 1,000 prostitutes that came out every night? In fact, the city had such immorality that you could use the term Corinthanize as an insult. You could use it to describe, that woman's very Corinthanized, or that man's very Corinthanized. You would use that as an insult. You would be calling someone a prostitute, or really, it would have the weight of us using the term of calling someone a whore. And so there was that terminology that went along with Corinth. So even though it's this huge city, it's also a place of gross immorality. And even though Paul has shared the gospel on many different turfs all over the Roman world, he gets to Corinth and he's intimidated. He's intimidated. He's going through a lot of different things. This is actually a picture of what it looks like today. Go into the next picture, Jim. You can kind of see. So he walks into something that looks like this. This is a drawing of what it might have looked like. So he walks into something that looks like this, and he's intimidated by everything that has been going on. And he even describes that intimidation. We don't have time to go there. But as you get into passages like 1 Corinthians, he begins to talk about, man, that was not easy. My journey coming to Corinth, it was not easy. And even though he had some friends there, we saw last week that of course he had Aquila and Priscilla. Timothy is going to show up and help him out with his time in his ministry. Also Silas is going to show up and help with that ministry. But even with his team together, it was a season of things that were taking place in his heart. And so I want us to pick up right here in Chapter 18, Acts chapter 18, we're going to start right here in verse 5. We'll see his companions coming to him. And then we're gonna read through the passage, and then we're just going to kind of come in and hone in on two short verses. It says, when Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, so they had been off, but here Paul is, Paul devoted himself to preaching of the word and testified to the Jews that Jesus is the Messiah. When they resisted and blasphemed, he shook out his clothes and told them, your blood is on your own head. I am innocent. In other words, he had said, look, listen, I'm telling you the gospel. I'm telling you the way to be saved, okay? And you are rejecting it. There's something to be said for each and every person within the sound of my voice today. I can share the gospel of Jesus Christ to you till I am blue in the face. But if you do not accept it, then you do not have it. You are not saved, and you will feel the wrath of God at the end of your life. It's not popular for us to talk about, but that's the truth. And so here they are. He's telling very religious men and women, these Jewish people, about Jesus. They choose to reject it. And so Paul says, all right, I've done my job. So now your blood is on your own head. And then it goes on from there. It says, from now on, I'll go to the Gentiles. And so he left there, and he went to the house of a man called Titius Justus, a worshiper of God whose house was next door to the synagogue. So his house was probably similar to like my house. I don't have to walk very far. And so he's coming over here, and he walks right next to the synagogue where he just shared with the Jews. And then in verse 8 it says, Crispus, the leader of the synagogue, believed in the Lord along with his whole household. And many of the Corinthians, when they heard this, believed and were baptized. So we're beginning to see some fruit. I mean, even Crispus, he's taking his life in his own hands. We see how much the Jews are rejecting this. He is the leader of those Jews, the leader of that synagogue, but this is clicking for him. This is making sense, and he gives his life to Christ. And so we're beginning to see some fruit that's taking place, even though there's been some rejection. And then this is where God speaks to Paul. And this is where we're going to spend the majority of our time today. Verse 9. The Lord said to Paul in a night vision, don't be afraid, but keep speaking. Don't be silent. For I'm with you. No one will lay a hand on you and hurt you because I have many people in this city. He stayed there a year and a half, teaching the word of God among them. While Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, that just means the governor, so governor of that region, the Jews made a united attack against Paul and brought him to the tribunal. And this man, they said, is persuading people to worship God in ways that are contrary to the law. As Paul was about to open his mouth, now Paul's been in this situation before, and so he's getting ready to defend himself. So he's getting ready to open his mouth, he's getting ready to defend himself, and Gallio, who's the proconsul at the time, I can imagine him putting his hand up, almost like, wait, I don't want to hear this. Now look at this, he's getting ready to speak, all right? Look, it says, if this were a matter of wrongdoing or of a serious crime, it would be reasonable for me to put up with you Jews. But if these are questions about words, names, and of your own law, see to it yourselves. I refuse to be a judge of such things. And so he drove them from the tribunal. So they all seized Sosthenes, who is the leader of the synagogue. So something had happened in between that year and a half where it was Crispus. Now it's Sosthenes, the leader of the synagogue, and they beat him in front of the tribunal, but none of these things mattered to Gallio. And so that's where we're going to kind of stop today and just see what all is taking place, you know. So here, Apostle Paul, we don't get a lot of details, but we know that he's investing at least a year and a half of his life here. And what we can see in verses 9 and 10 is that as he's coming in, he's intimidated. He doesn't know where this is going to go. God speaks to him. And I believe that God has just a few things for us even today that we can take away from this. And so we're just kind of hone in on two verses this morning of verse 9 and verse 10. And so if you got your notes, I want you to pull them out. And I want you to see that when God gives you an assignment, because God gave the Apostle Paul an assignment, and that assignment was to take the gospel wherever he went. Now, up until this point, he had been moving quickly. He's sharing the gospel, he's moving on. He's sharing the gospel, he's moving on. He's sharing the gospel, he's moving on. Now he gets to Corinth, and God says, now I want you to spend some time here. I want you to pause here. And so he comes to him in a vision. And so here's what I want us to see. When God gives you an assignment, he never leaves your side. He's right there giving you, write this down, His peace. He's right there giving you His peace. It says in the vision that God gives him, He says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I want you to hear that this morning. Whatever you're going through in life, don't be afraid. I was looking up how many times, because I know this is all throughout the Scriptures, how many times this don't fear or fear not is in the Bible. Did you know that fear not or do not fear or don't be afraid of something of that nature is in the Bible? You ready for this? 365 times. That's one for every day of the year. Do not fear. Do not be afraid. Don't do that. God gives us His peace. My wife will be speaking on Psalm chapter 23 this Wednesday. And as I was thinking about Psalms chapter 23, most of us know it. You know, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. But as you go down that passage of Psalm chapter 23 and you get into verse 4, listen to this. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, what does he say? I will fear no evil. I'll fear no evil because you're with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. As I was thinking about this, I was reading, I came across an article this past week about two different painters. And these two different painters got in a contest because the object of their contest was that they were supposed to be painting what it means to have peace. What it means to have peace. And so one painter did kind of what you and I might think about what it means to have peace. And he painted a beautiful sunset over some water. There were some trees. Just the calmness that I don't know if you've ever been maybe to the beach or if you've ever been to someplace and you're thinking, oh, yes, that's just what I need in order to have peace. There's a couple of folks in here and you love to go to Disney on your vacation. I do not understand you. That's not where I get rejuvenated. That's not where I find peace, okay? So it's the happiest place on the planet. Yeah, right. Did you bring kids? But you know, and I think of that. And so I'm always looking, give me a beach. Give me some mountains. Give me some of that. And when I think of that, so I can totally see where this painter was going. But then there was another painter, and in his competition, he drew, and he did something totally different. And in his painting, he did an ocean as well, but he did it with waves. He did it with clouds. He did it with a storm, with lightning, and with all of these different things. And in the midst of that, there's these two rocks that came together to kind of just cover this area. And within these two rocks, underneath it was a bird who is being protected by these rocks and the wind and all the lightning and the storm and everything. And this little bird was singing. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes you will have the scenic, and sometimes you will just be protected from the elements. I want you to hear loud and clear that even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we're called not to fear any evil. And the Apostle Paul hears that. The words of Jesus himself, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Whatever you see in this world today, whatever is going on at your company, whatever is taking place in the midst of your relationships, God has given you an assignment. He's given you an assignment. He wants you to follow. He just simply wants you to be faithful with the assignment that you've given him. And I want you to hear this loud and clear. He is speaking to the Apostle Paul, but he's also speaking to you this morning. Don't be afraid. 365 times, one for every day of the year. The second thing that I believe, as we see this in verse 9, so he says, don't be afraid. But then he says, keep on speaking, don't be silent. So he's addressing the assignment that he's been given. And so when God gives you an assignment, he never leaves your side. He's right there giving you, number 2, write this down, his perseverance. His perseverance. His perseverance. Keep going. Don't stop. You've got this. And so here he is. He knows that he's going to be there for a while. And the Apostle Paul is so used to moving on. Don't move on. I want you to stop and I want you to persevere. And so as I thought about this, I thought about one of the best ways for me to talk through what that might have been like. when I was in high school, I ran cross country, okay? Because I was cursed with any game that involved a ball, all right? So I thought, what doesn't have a ball? Cross country, okay? So anyway, so I go out there and I ran cross country, and we would do the practices every day and all that. But then it would come time for us to run the race. A lot of times you would have to travel somewhere and you would run. Sometimes you run on pavement. A lot of times you run on the woods. But there was a thought that always went through my mind while I was running that 3.1 miles with all these other folks. You know, you start out to the clapping of everyone. Everyone's cheering as you get going, but you get in the middle of the woods. There is no clapping. There is no cheering. There is nothing. And so as I thought about that, there was one thought that went through my mind the whole time, and it was simply this: why am I doing this? Why? Why am I doing this? And I had to tell myself, okay, Dan, you've got this. You keep going. And I had one goal in mind, especially because you're trying to run as fast as you can. And the worst part is if someone passes you. I mean, that really brings you down. So the one thing that I thought over and over, aside from why am I doing this, is whatever you do, don't stop. Whatever you do, don't walk. Just keep jogging. If all you can do, if you get a side stitch, keep jogging. If you feel good, keep going. If you feel bad, keep going. No matter what, you keep going. And you know when it all made sense, because running doesn't always make sense. You know, you're like, why? You know, we have cars. You know, why would we run? For fun. All of those things. It all makes sense when you cross the finish line. When you cross that finish line and you go, that's what it was all about, accomplishing your goal. I want to put this up here on the screen. It comes out of Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. And so when you're running, the goal is just to simply cross the finish line. Hebrews 12, verse 1 talks about this. The author of Hebrews says, therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, those are people in heaven. Those are people in heaven who have gone before you, particularly Old Testament characters, if you're talking about this in context. But let us, look at this, throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Check this out. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. So you say, Dan, that was Apostle Paul's assignment in Acts chapter 18. No. It's your assignment and my assignment too. That each and every one of us is called to run the race of this life and living for Jesus and sharing the gospel, living by faith each and every day. And we're called to do it with perseverance, the race marked out for us. Look, because do we have our eyes fixed on the finish line? Yes, but it's not just the finish line. It's who's at the finish line. We'll go on into verse 2 here. It says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. You know, when you feel down and out and you feel like you can't take one more step, and this whole perseverance thing just seems like just a wild notion. What am I supposed to consider? I'm supposed to keep my eyes on Jesus, and the same thing that we celebrated this morning with the Lord's Supper. If he can do the cross, surely I can do this. We look at him. He endured the cross, scorning his shame, sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And then it finishes with this. It says, consider him, talking about Jesus, who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you do not grow weary and lose heart. That's how you do it. It's where you keep your eyes. Where are your eyes this morning? Where are your eyes? What are you focusing in on? Are you focusing in on the news? Are you focusing in on the emails? Are you focusing in on what's coming in? What's your focus? Let your focus be Jesus and his perseverance. As we get back into verse 10, we go back to chapter 18 of Acts, and in verse 10, he tells them, all right, so keep going with the assignment. But then he follows it up with this. Look at this in verse 10. For I am with you. For I am with you. Folks, don't gloss over that. Because when God gives you an assignment, he never leaves your side. He's right there. He gives you his peace. He gives you his perseverance. But number 3, he gives you his presence. He gives you himself. He gives you his presence. So much of what the world looks for to give them things like peace and perseverance is stuff. They're looking for stuff. We say to ourselves, God, I need this. Have you ever been in that situation? God, I need this. Fill in the blank. What is it? What is it in your life right now? God, I need this. Boom. We try to fill in that blank. I need this. And sometimes we even get mad at God. And we'll say, God, didn't I tell you what I need? And God is looking right back at us and says, you know what your greatest need is? I know your needs. I know your needs. But your greatest need is my presence. Your greatest need is simply me. Did you know that after the people of Israel sinned by bowing down to the golden calf, okay? They bowed down to the golden calf. God judges them, and God actually tells Moses, he says, you know what? This is the Dan Pritchett version of the Bible. He says, you know what? I'm going to send a whole bunch of hornets ahead of you into the promised land to cast the people out of the promised land, and you guys can have it. He said, but I'm not going with you. You know that passage? You know that part of the story? And Moses gets down on his knees, and he says, Lord, don't allow us to take one more step if you don't go with us. Because Moses recognized that they need his presence. That if God is not going with you, then you're not going. And for us, I want us to understand that proximity is everything. I talked about the word Emmanuel earlier. God with us. And we could say, but isn't God omnipresent? I mean, don't we have that truth? God is everywhere all the time. What do you mean He's not going with you? Yes, God is everywhere. David tells us that. But that doesn't mean that He doesn't manifest His presence with us. And so for us to have the manifested presence of God wherever we go, proximity is everything. If you're struggling to grab a hold of that concept, let me give you a great analogy. Yesterday, I'm with my 2-year-old daughter. And we actually had come in here to the church, and we came into the sanctuary. And so I'm one of those guys, I like to move around quick. I just came in, had to get a few things done. And so I kind of moved around quick. We're all down here on the bottom floor. And anyway, so the lights were off. I kind of know where things are. And I was getting ready to leave. So I went out towards the front door, and I said, okay, it's time for us to go. And she was still in here. She could hear my voice, but she couldn't see me. And she began to get nervous, and in her nervousness, she began to cry. And I went and I found her. I said, follow my voice. I'm right here. I'm right here. I'm right here. Follow my voice. Follow my voice. And she came and she found me. And when she saw me, she came around the corner of those 2 doors, and she saw me, and relief just came over her. Now, I hadn't left, and she knew that I hadn't left because she was still hearing my voice. But when she saw me, and when she saw my presence, that's when the relief came. Ladies and gentlemen, that's how it is with our God. That, you know what? We might be given the Word of God. We might be given the assignment. We might be given everything that we need to do. But we have to have His presence right there with us. That's ultimately what gives us confidence. And as I meditated on that scenario with my daughter, I said, certain presence and certainty go hand in hand. If you go out to play, sometimes you might say as a parent, stay where I can see you. Have you ever said that as a parent? You can go out, you can play in this field, but stay where I can see you. Because presence and certainty go hand in hand. And when we have God's presence in our life, that's when we are the most certain. And that's what he's saying to the Apostle Paul right here. He's not just saying, don't be afraid, keep on speaking, don't be silent, end of story. That's not what he says. He says, don't be afraid, keep on speaking, don't be silent, for I am with you. Certainty. And then he goes on to talk about his protection. No one will lay a hand on you or hurt you because I have many people in this city. So the final thing that I want you to write down this morning is when God gives you an assignment, He never leaves your side. He's right there giving you, number 4, His protection. His protection. I have many people in this city. No one's going to hurt you. In 1529, that's the year 1529, Martin Luther wrote the song, based on Psalm 46, "A mighty fortress is our God." Have you ever sang that song? Mighty fortress is our God. Mighty fortress is our God. A bulwark never failing. Our helper he amid the flood of mortal ills prevailing. Now I had to go back, okay, because it's not really a part of my common everyday language to know what a bulwark is, okay? Do you know what a bulwark is? I just don't use that word that often, so I had to go and look that one up. A bulwark is simply this: a wall, typically made of dirt. When I thought of that myself, I thought, oh, okay, it's a levee. All right, that's what a bulwark is. All right, I can totally understand that. And so that a mighty fortress is our God, God's protection over us. It's a levee, it's a wall, it's a dam, and the definition is that holds back the flood. Back when Hurricane Katrina came through New Orleans, the levees broke. When we see other places when hurricanes have come through them, many times they don't have levees. When Hurricane Ida came through, the one thing that I was asking is, what's going to happen with the levees? Everything. God himself is our bulwark. He is our levee. He is the one who protects us. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to get pounded by the wind and the waves, but it means that he will help you to remain strong when you have the King as he goes alongside with you. I don't know where you're at in this life, but here's one thing that I do know, is that regardless of where you are, God's presence is what you need, and he never leaves your side. But he's not just there standing, he's there protecting you. And so for all of us, as we get ready to close in our time together, when God gives you an assignment, and God has given us all an assignment, yes, to share the gospel, but God has also given us assignment in our jobs, with our families, with all of those things. And I want to remind you here this morning that you are never alone. You might feel alone, you might feel intimidated, possibly feel intimidated, but you are never alone. He is there with his presence, and he is there with his protection. Let's bow and have a word of prayer.